Don't you want to know what it's like inside a house like that? A nice house? I don't know anybody that lives like that.
It's not your house, man.
Los ricos aren't even here. It's fucking cruel, man. They have this bomb-ass house in the middle of our shitty-ass neighborhood, and they don't even bother to enjoy it. Meanwhile, I have to use a fucking plunger every time I want to flush the toilet.
The best way that you can, break in as a director. It's funny because, before I did Rich Kids, I also was a filmmaker out there trying to, who had this great dream of making a film and, didn't have the financing or the access.
Hey, welcome back if you've just watched part 1 of this video series, Low Budget Filmmaking Tricks with Laura Summers. This is part 2, and this is going to cover more about budget, how using this tip will save you money for your production and make your movie look great. Hey, it worked for Laura Summers with her movie Rich Kids, and it will work for you. And be sure that you stay to the end of this video because I will give you a preview of part 3 of this video series. But if you haven't watched part 1, sneak back and watch that one as well, because that deals with the foundations of your movie, how to cut right out of the gate and get a great movie by following this tip. So if you would give this video a like, because it makes the YouTube algorithm happy, and I would appreciate it. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this one.
To set the story in locations that are free to you.
Yes.
Because, finding locations are expensive, and that can take a large part of your budget. But if you think to yourself, like, what do I have that is available to me? Which is, and then how can I craft a story around that? What I did was I thought about the locations that I had, and what I had was my childhood home that I grew up in Texas, and that was available to me for free. And it was this really big, beautiful house. And I lived in a neighborhood of people who were at a lower income than my family. And so I said, I'm going to tell this story. I want to shoot a story in my parents' house. It's available. They're not living in it right now, so I can tell the story. What's the story I can tell?
Perfect.
Yes. And so I thought about it, and the story of Rich Kids actually happened to me, to my family. Like I said, we lived in this neighborhood of, people who lived at a lower income than we were. And we had this big house. It was this mystical place in the middle of the neighborhood that everybody wanted to know about. And oftentimes kids in the neighborhood would break into the house because they wanted to see what was going on. Yeah. And so, one time when my family was out of town, some kids broke into the house and kind of spent some time there, a couple of days. And the film Rich Kids actually ended up happening. Like, the part, they leave the house, they go and they get into a high-speed car chase with the police.
Yeah.
And then, the tragic thing that happened at the end of the story happens. And so I thought, well, that's a really interesting framework to tell, is the story, because I think everybody wants to know what it's like to live a different life than the life that we have.
Right.
But I thought,
Absolutely.
it would be really interesting, instead of telling it from the family's perspective who own the house, I thought it would be much more interesting to tell the story from the kids' perspective, from the people who are breaking in, intruders, but then making them the good guys, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And really exploring, like, getting to live that fantasy, of life on the other side.
And you did a very good job of that, by the way.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so, I just wrote about the kids that I knew that I grew up with. I wrote about myself, about experiences that, I had had growing up, about things that, personal things that I think about and believe, or that my friends believed. And then wrote this story. And I think and that's where, we're going back to the authenticity and about telling your story.
Yes.
Because once I believe that as personal as you can get with your story, the more universal it's going to become. Like I found that as I do that, when I do that with any kind of creative project that I do, that more and more people will come to me at the end and be like, wow, I never thought anybody ever felt that way. And now I don't feel like alone anymore.
Right.
And so, again, this story of Rich Kids, we traveled it around the country at different film festivals, and we played it for all different kinds of audiences, young and old, rich and poor, different races and cultures. And, everybody loved the film. I mean, I won't say everybody, but
Right.
a large majority of the people just had such a positive reaction to it and just really took something home from it.
Right.
I think I think that that's just the best way to do. And there have been filmmakers that have done, incredible filmmakers who have done really wacky stories and stories that, are, so like their personal thing that, no one can relate to it, but it's still something about it that shows their voice and makes them really special.
Right.
So those are the things that those are the two big things I think for people to think about.
So as promised, here is your preview for part 3 of this video series. Thank you for staying to the end, and here you go.
What I had mentioned was to cultivate your fan base from friends and family. This is a really important part of the process.